Oh, look, there's a guy that talks about some hidden indie games. Yeah, that's basically me. I love indie games, and I like to pick them very randomly. So, like always, some of these will be known releases. Some will be hidden releases you probably never heard of. And every single game in this video drops in May 2026. So, if you stick around, you will discover hidden gems with this video before everyone else does. You'll also discover that the creators of Disco Elysium just released a new game. May is packed with weird, cozy, brutal and beautiful indies, and most people will miss them because they do not have a $1 million trailer. But I'm here to find the gold. I'm sure some of these games have great potential. We are starting with this one because the concept alone deserves respect. You know the meme, dog, burning room, everything is fine. It's one of the most universally understood images on the internet. And someone looked at that meme and thought, you know what? This should be a Metroidvania. You play as Question Hound, exploring a collapsing theme park that is physically built from anxiety. And I mean that as a design statement, not just a vibe. The enemies represent specific everyday fears. Toilet monsters, flying textbooks, the kind of things that shouldn't be scary but somehow are. Each of the 5 worlds has its own boss and its own emotional flavor. And as you unlock new abilities, you can go back to earlier areas and push deeper into the chaos. The Metroidvania structure, where you're constantly going back, revisiting old places with new tools, actually mirrors how anxiety works. You think you've moved past something and then you're back there again. The coffee as currency is a nice touch too, very on brand. This one is quiet and strange in the best way. You have a heat cannon, you melt snow, you explore a frozen world underneath. That's the pitch, but the detail that actually got me is that beneath the snow, the whole visual language of the game changes. Caves, reflections, dripping water. It shifts from an open, snowy landscape into something much more intimate and eerie. That contrast, the world above versus the world below, is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Your goal is to find and reassemble the remains of an ancient mammoth, piece by piece, which is a sentence I did not expect to type this month, but here we are. When heat isn't enough, there's dynamite. I appreciate a game that knows when to escalate. Roguelike deck builder where you build island settlements. I know, the genre is crowded. But Islantiles has something that caught my attention as a developer. The technology cards in this game don't just buff your existing strategy. They change the fundamental rules. How tiles interact, how scoring works, what strategies are even viable. So every run isn't just a different arrangement of the same system. It's a slightly different game each time. Keeping it balanced while making each technology feel meaningfully different is a real challenge. And if you've pulled it off across more than 100 technologies, that's impressive. 6 difficulty settings and 100 handcrafted islands suggest there's real depth here beyond the first few runs. Nature sandbox where you shape the terrain and everything in the world responds. Water flows, animals move, plants grow. Your tribe survives or doesn't based on how well you understand the systems. The full campaign is already playable, which for an early access launch is exactly how it should work. The piece still being built out in the level editor, and the dev team is being upfront about that. Planning about 6 months in early access and leaning on community feedback to shape where the editor goes. The water simulation is apparently fully functional already, and I keep coming back to that because anyone who's worked with fluid simulation in a game engine knows that is genuinely not trivial. Getting water to behave in a way that feels natural and also interacts meaningfully with terrain is a hard problem. If they've solved it, the rest of the game has a very strong foundation to build on. This is the one I almost guarantee you haven't heard of. Truth Games, a small independent studio from Guangzhou, China. The game started as an entry in the Boom Game Jam, a twice-yearly event in China where teams have 3 weeks to build a game around a given theme. This came out of that jam, got enough attention, and became a full release. That journey alone is worth talking about. It's an isometric visual novel set in a small fictional town called West Town, where a festival is about to happen. You arrive as an outsider. Over more than 10 in-game days, you ride trams through different districts, run a small shop, talk to people, and slowly piece together both the present state of the town and something that happened 30 years ago. The developer describes it as a place where vitality and decay constantly collide, which is exactly the kind of phrase that makes me want to spend time somewhere. I mean, look at the graphics of this game. A bodycam FPS set in Hong Kong. You play as a survivor with a pistol, a bodycam, and a very personal kill list. The levels are tight and linear. The gunplay is fast and unforgiving. One miss and you're dead. And the whole aesthetic is directly inspired by classic Hong Kong action cinema from the 80s and 90s. John Woo energy, basically, if John Woo shot in first person through a body camera. A linear action game with a strong cinematic vision is a bold thing to release unfinished, because pacing and tone are so fragile. But the concept is compelling enough that I'm watching this one closely. It seems that 2 people made this one. One developer in Quebec, one composer in California, working remotely. The game is about helping a small, round elephant named Elfie build sandcastles by arranging 3D sand blocks to match her vision. 186 levels. No timers, no fixed solutions, simple controls, touchscreen support, a lo-fi beach soundtrack. They also put a statement on their Steam page saying they are firmly against generative AI at any stage of the creative process. The game looks genuinely charming, and I think it knows its audience very well, which is itself a kind of skill. This is the sequel to Call of the Sea, the puzzle adventure from 2020 that got very strong reviews. If you played that one, you already know what you're getting into here. If you didn't, the short version is observation-based puzzles, richly detailed environments, and the story about people who discover something ancient and genuinely incomprehensible. This one follows 2 protagonists, Professor Harry Everhart and student Evangeline Drayton, very British. And you can swap between them to solve problems that stretch across time and space. Built in Unreal Engine 5, voice cast includes Yuri Lowenthal, who you might know from the Spider-Man games or Arcane, and Cissy Jones from Firewatch and Baldur's Gate 3. The fact that a sequel to an indie puzzle adventure attracted that caliber of voice talent says something about how well the first game was received. Second bodycam game this month. First-person horror set in an abandoned hospital with something hunting you underground. Officer Jason Thompson, again very British. Routine operation, immediately not routine. The thing hunting you does not stop. It does not get tired. It just keeps coming. The game makes that its whole identity. The relentless pursuit, the feeling that no matter where you go, no matter how fast you move, it reaches. 2 bodycam games in the same month in completely different genres is interesting timing. One is a revenge action film, one is a horror nightmare. Same visual language, completely different emotional experience. The bodycam format is having a real moment right now, and it's genuinely fascinating to watch developers figure out what it's actually good for beyond novelty. Fourth entry in the World War I game series, which focuses specifically on the Ottoman fronts of World War I. Beach landings at Gallipoli, desert warfare in Mesopotamia, fighting as either British or Ottoman forces. The series has built a reputation for authentic, methodical FPS gameplay with realistic weapon handling, proper squad roles, and a genuine attempt to represent the historical context rather than just use World War I as a backdrop. The Gallipoli campaign in particular is one of the most historically significant and catastrophic episodes of the war, a subject that deserves careful handling. From what's described, the team is treating it seriously. Historical maps, accurate weapons, realistic morale mechanics. For anyone interested in that period of history, this looks like the most detailed game treatment of the Ottoman front yet. Coffee Talk is back, and this time you're behind the counter in Tokyo. Late night cafe, summer heat, humans and yokai coming in with things on their minds. You brew drinks, you listen, you make choices that shape how their stories unfold. The series has always been about the specific feeling of a quiet place where people say things they wouldn't say anywhere else. Tokyo is a great setting for that. A city where the ancient and the completely modern sit right next to each other every single day. New characters, new stories, a returning lo-fi composer who did the music for both previous games, and an expanded social network feature with clickable hashtags that can lead you to hidden story threads. If you've been a fan of the series, this is the one you've been waiting for. If you've never played Coffee Talk, this is as good an entry point as any. Okay, here's where we've been heading. The team behind Disco Elysium is back. And I want to take a moment to explain why that sentence carries so much weight, because if you haven't followed what happened with that game and the studio that made it, the full story is complicated and worth knowing. Disco Elysium came out in 2019, and it did something that most RPGs don't even attempt. It made your character's psychology a mechanical system. Your skills were actual voices in your head. They argued with each other. They gave you bad advice. They occasionally saved your life. The writing was extraordinary. The world was dense and political and strange, and it became one of the most discussed RPGs in years. Then, at some point, I read that the studio went through a very public and painful internal collapse. Several of the original creative leads, the people most responsible for what made Disco Elysium what it was, departed or were removed from the company. For a while, it genuinely looked like the creative vision was just gone, done, a one-time thing. And then Zero Parades was announced. I actually don't know how many of them are still involved, so let's talk about the game. You play as a brilliant, burnt-out spy who 5 years ago led his team into disaster and has been living with it ever since. He gets called for one final assignment that might give him a chance to prove himself again. Your skills talk to you and give advice, but how much you trust them is up to you. There's a system called pressures and exertion that lets you push beyond your limits to force better outcomes, at a cost to your mental and physical state. A tactical view lets you freeze time and think through your approach. And the whole thing is built around psychological depth, surrealist undertones, and a city that exists as much inside the mind as on any map. Based on who made it and what they've described building, if they execute even half of it the way Disco Elysium was executed, we are going to be talking about Zero Parades for a very long time. First of all, let's stop for a moment and think about the name of this game. Beastro. A fantasy cooking game where you play as a young chef named Panko. The premise is that you're running a restaurant in a town under threat, and your job is to keep the townspeople fed and happy, while also feeding the adventurers who are also going out to deal with the monsters. You are the support system, the logistics behind the heroics. There's a skill tree, restaurant management, cooking minigames, and a story about what happens when the person who was always in the background has to step up. As a narrative concept, I think there's something really interesting about centering the cook rather than the warrior. The kitchen as the heart of the community is not a new idea, but games don't explore it often enough. Basically, you build and run an electronics repair shop, fix old consoles, Game Boys, phones, swap components, and test everything before it goes on the shelf. You also deal with customers who are absolutely sure their GPU is fine when it is definitely not fine. There's also co-op support, so you and your friends can split the chaos. One on the sales floor, one at the repair bench. The progression goes from tiny shop to full retail floor, which is the structure that makes these management sims genuinely compelling. That feeling of watching something you built from nothing become something real. If you've lost time to games like PC Building Simulator or Car Mechanic Simulator, this is speaking directly to you. Rome has fallen. Citizens have reanimated. You and up to 7 other players rebuild civilization, establish settlements, construct buildings, keep people fed, fight off the undead at night, and eventually start exploring the procedurally generated world for dungeons and bosses. The resource system is the detail that stood out to me. No inventory management. You physically pick up, carry, and throw objects in the world. And if something is attacking you, you can throw the rock you were carrying at it. That kind of physicality in a survival game feels fresh. It removes an abstraction layer and puts you directly in the experience of actually moving stuff around a settlement. Simple idea, significant design impact. 1990s Poland. You run a car repair shop. You are encouraged by the economics of the situation to cut corners, paint over rust, use the cheapest possible parts, mix things that probably shouldn't be mixed. Every decision has consequences, and some of those consequences show up later in ways you didn't see coming. It's a darkly funny sim with actual mechanical depth and a very specific setting that games almost never touch. I love when a game has a premise this specific. Someone made this because they wanted to make exactly this, and that energy comes through. The moon is falling. 21 nanoseconds before everything ends. You play as Mary, who wakes up with no memories in a strange room and becomes guided by a cat named Hamlet, the last confidant for souls wandering between life and death. People call her. She listens to their final words, their regrets, the moments they are leaving behind. This is a visual novel that describes itself as picture book-like. And the premise is one of the more quietly devastating things I've read this month. There's something very human about the idea that at the very end, what people want is just to be heard one more time. I don't know how long it is or how it plays out, but I want to find out. As you will see, this is a pixel art turn-based SRPG. You follow Star, a tomboyish warrior, and her childhood friend Yu on an adventure tied to stars and fate. Classic strategy RPG structure, dramatic 2D animations for ultimate abilities. A story about growth and the bond between two people walking the same road. If you have any history with Fire Emblem or the classic tactics games, this was made for you. The pixel art looks beautiful and the battle presentation seems to have real impact. Keeping an eye on this one. So, this is what the indie space does. It doesn't wait for permission. It just builds things that nobody else would build. Things that are weird and specific and personal and sometimes completely impossible on paper. And then they exist. And sometimes they change everything. That's the part that never stops being impressive to me. Every single month, someone somewhere is making something that shouldn't work, and it works. And I get to talk about it, which is honestly a pretty good situation to be in. If any of these caught your attention, drop it in the comments. I want to know which one made you stop. Like the video and subscribe if you're enjoying this kind of content. it genuinely helps more than people realize. And like always, thanks for watching.